There's gonna be a slew of people that are gonna be upset that this isn't a reaction video, but like I said, man, I got a life, I got things to do, and I can't always listen to everything on time, and there's some things that I just want to spoil myself with, okay? Vic's project was coming out, and I was like, you know what, I gotta listen to it on demand. I can't even do it, I'm sorry. That being said, we got Vic Mensa's new project called the Autobiography. I believe this is his debut project, like his debut album. Looking back at a few of his more recent projects, we've got projects like There's a Lot Going On, which I was a pretty good fan of. I wouldn't say it was his best work or anything like that, but it displayed kind of Vic's skill set and where he can take his range as a rapper. Seeing that on a lot of the tracks that he displayed on that EP, he actually did a lot of vocal acrobatics, if you will. That thought process kind of showed up on his most recent EP, the Manuscript, something he refers to as a capsule. So I was curious to see how it would sound on this project, if we were gonna get really deep Vic, if we were gonna get singing Vic, if we were gonna get the rock and roll Vic, and we got a little bit of all of those mixed into one project, which I was happy about. I was actually happy to see that he incorporated all of his skill sets into this album as opposed to just being a soul rap album. So how did this thing fare, and how did I feel about it? I would say this is probably one of the most introspective albums I've heard all year. On this project, Vince is
Look, alright, just hand me my L, alright? Sometimes when I'm pronouncing Vic Mensa's name, sometimes I say Vince and it just comes out weird, so just hand me my L, delete your comment, and leave me alone.
Telling a lot of stories with the intention, I feel, of leaving all this information in the past. Like, he really has a lot that he wants to get off his chest, and I feel like this is more of a diary than it is an album, because Vince does ramble for quite a few moments on this thing. I won't say that he is rambling to the point where, you know, the song itself loses significant value, but there are some tracks on here where Vince is just talking,
whose mans is this?
Continuing to go on and on and on. I can really commend Vic for coming at certain social issues from a very emotional standpoint on a lot of these tracks, because my main gripe with artists that tend to discuss issues that surround such a vast audience, meaning that these topics or these subjects that they're discussing, they affect a lot of people on a regular basis. I don't want them to talk about them with very little emotion, or not doing the subject itself justice by giving it the proper time and intricate details that it deserves, because this album is pretty layered. Subjects that Vince goes into, even on the first track, when Vince is talking about how he grew up in Chicago, Vince goes into like this incredible amount of detail talking about, you know, how he was raised in the street, learning the difference between black and white at a very young age. Also kind of explaining to people that you don't have to fit into one box, because he also says, I was just a youngin' pretty much, dressed up as a rock star, trying to be Jimi Hendrix. Saying that you don't have to necessarily fall into one category, you don't have to just like rap, you don't have to be so traditional just because you're black and you grow up in a certain neighborhood. Lines on this thing that impacted me a lot, because I can identify with a lot of what he's speaking with. I like that this thing is called the Autobiography, because it does lack features intentionally on some tracks, so you can hear the passion and the pain in Vic's voice. Like on Memories on 47th Street, we get Vic singing the hook and giving a lot of passion, drawing out a lot of pain from his voice. It seems like he's really desperate on this track, even though it's a track that instrumentally I'm not a huge fan of. It's almost like Vic was asking himself this entire time, why is this happening, or I don't understand why you're doing this, maybe in reference to the place that he grew up, in reference to people not understanding him, in reference to the police brutality. Like, please help me understand, because I don't get it. I really enjoyed the track Homewrecker on here, where again goes into an incredible amount of detail explaining the situation, being caught in between two chicks, his actual girlfriend finding out, she's making the entire scene and place chaotic.
Although I'm damn near in love with this track for the Weezer production, that's not gonna keep me from seeing some struggle bars to say you keep bringing me back in like a Chinese finger trap. Why? Vic, you made it out, okay? You don't have to struggle anymore. Stop giving me struggle bars.
It's almost really twisted. Vic does acknowledge that he's wrong in this track, but he's also defending the person that he's cheating on his girlfriend with, saying, baby, don't cut her, please don't beat her, all this other stuff. All in the process, while she's fighting him, he's wondering, how did she get this strong? Vic apparently in this situation not understanding how angry his girl must be with him at this point.
The only really great part about this track is the fact that this may be an evolution in rap, that we may get more rock influenced fusions as opposed to the trap flavored R&B standard beats that we normally get, because Vic creatively easily could have thrown an R&B slap on this thing and just let it be, but he decided to go a step further and add a little bit of rock influence, which in my opinion was way more hard-hitting than any R&B instrumental ever could have been for this type of subject. I'm not gonna say it came across as the best track lyrically, but as far as the sound is concerned and painting the picture for you, it does that really well well.
Another track that I really love on here is Wings, that's produced by Pharrell. And Vic, his flow on this entire thing is insane. He gets aggressive, he gets calm at some points, he speeds it up, he slows it down. Again, goes into an incredible amount of detail explaining the conflict of his drug abuse, not being good enough, constantly messing up. He explains that the voice inside of his head is explaining to him or trying to convince him that he's impossible to love or that no one would want to be around you, you're a waste of space. Talks a lot about his depression on this track. He even tells himself you're nothing but a drug addict, you're nothing without your medicine. Really hard on himself on this track. And I know he's trying to say these are the dark places that your mind may go when you're in such a low spot in life, but the fact that he's depicting these emotions so well on this track and giving you such a good vivid view of how he was in this moment is incredible for me. Another track on here which is great that features Dolla is We Could Be Free, where Vic again I'm gonna stop saying incredible amount of detail, but you get the idea. Talking about how if people just understood one another, we could be free of that pain, you know. If I stopped looking at my enemy as my enemy and started looking at him as my brother and understanding that people do things for different reasons. Starts off where Vic is kind of explaining or asking people not to be judgmental while at the same time going into the subject matter of having a lot of survivor's guilt. And if he's seeing everything in this position, he feels like he should be doing something about it, you know, chastising people who believe all lives matter but don't understand that black lives aren't included in that. And he seems to get progressively angrier as opposed to remorseful and understanding. In the beginning of this track, there's a big difference in emotion and vocal tone, and that's one of the things that I really wanted to give Vic Mensa props on with this project, is being able to display his emotion perfectly on each track, on perfect terms with the subject matter at some points, because some tracks he sounds really desperate to find the answer, other tracks he's really angry, like on Down for Some Ignorance, he's really aggressive, he's really trying to allow people to understand that you really shouldn't be about this life if you're not really about it. There were the other bonus tracks from his capsule that showed up on this project that I wasn't really fond of. I mean, I'd already heard them, so hearing them on this project, it didn't go any deeper, add that much context to me, especially with tracks like OMG that features Pusha T. I like the fact that Rage was included. It does definitely explore a lot of Vic Mensa's versatility and where he can go as an artist and his vocal range. There were a handful of tracks on this thing that I did not think needed to be included at all. I think a lot of the time when Vic Mensa is explaining himself, he tends to talk a little bit too much or go and drag on for a little bit longer than I would need for him to. A track on here that I thought was perfect the way it was Coffee and Cigarettes, but Vic Mensa feels the need to rap on the remainder of this track for no reason. I don't know if he feels inadequate so that he feels like he might have to do a little bit extra to make the track better sometimes, because that does feel like what happens on a couple of these tracks. It's like, oh, let me switch this up when he doesn't really need to all the time. I feel like he's so focused on being as best as he can lyrically that he misses the aspect of making a song that sounds good, because some of these tracks could be interchanged with each other really easily and not really be missed as far as the concept is concerned. There aren't that many tracks on here that I think are beautifully produced, with the exception of the Pharrell track.
Wait, alright, let me explain. I know the first thing that's gonna come to people's mind is, wait, No ID produced the entire thing, what are you talking about? No ID had a hand in production for a good portion of this album. Again, I'm not saying these tracks are horrible instrumentally, I'm just saying they could have been done better. Some of them are kind of sleepy, I wouldn't necessarily say lazy, but there's nothing about a lot of these instrumentals that makes them pop. And the fact that No ID is kind of co-producing a good portion of this thing instead of being the main face of it, I feel like I'm kind of allotted to say a little bit more about, you know, the lack of powerful, punchy production on this thing.
I felt like the song with Sid was pretty much a waste. Going back really quick to the song Down for Some Ignorance, aka Ghetto Lullaby, Vic's lyrics in the beginning of the track, you know, hold up, wait a minute, grab a blunt, or put your hands up, or chill out, I'm about to spit something to you, basically letting you know that he's about to tell a story, and he refers to it as a ghetto lullaby, I think is great. Although the flow on this thing is pretty good, and I definitely can enjoy Vic Mensa's subject matter, I wouldn't necessarily say he does the track or the subject itself that much justice, because the details that he goes into aren't that, you know, intricate. You know, it's not that deep of a song, it's just pretty surface level in reference to things that we normally see or normally have heard about from other rap albums. It's like, hey, sit down, let me tell you a story that, you know, you've probably heard from somewhere else, but let me give you my version.
Like I said, Vic is an incredible artist. It just seems like he is the one who holds himself back more so than anybody else. Although on some tracks what he says just doesn't work and he's just beating a dead horse, like bringing up Macklemore and his Grammy situation, beating up that dead horse course, on the track Heaven on Earth. Look, Vic, even Macklemore understands that he shouldn't have won that Grammy, okay? We can all let it go. However, on this track, Heaven on Earth, this is one of my favorites as well that I didn't actually get to mention on camera because Vic, again, goes into incredible, vivid detail from the perspective of his brother's murderer. I say brother, but you know what I mean. You know, he's really a friend. He's not a blood relative, but when you're raised in this kind of environment, you tend to stick close and cling to those people that you end up making friends with, and they turn into your family. Speaking from his own perspective, then immediately going to his friend's perspective, then immediately going into his friend's murderer's perspective. This track is a little unrealistic in the sense that Vic describes the killer as, you know, the guy who was instantly remorseful. I'm not saying that, you know, he couldn't be, but Vic, you know, I'm assuming doesn't know the killer or he hasn't met the killer. Maybe there's information about that I don't know about, and you guys can, you know, speak to me on that, or, you know, Vic himself can add a little bit more context to that. Maybe he actually does know the killer and maybe they did rekindle and he let it go. I don't know for sure.
Hey, being honest, the thing starts strong, it ends pretty strong. You know, it has a message, it has a concept. Vic definitely destroys the concept, you know, in a good way, of saying that I'm going to give you my biography. I'm going to tell you everything about myself and tell you how I feel at each time, telling you or explaining with my voice and showing you through my vocal pattern how angry, upset, or confused I was at each moment. Like I said, on every track it's not so interesting. On some tracks it's like Vic needs to kind of incorporate something else or make a surprising element to the song other than just using his voice, because the tracks, like I said themselves, if you were to play them by themselves, there's really not that much enjoyment. You need Vic on these tracks to experience the enjoyment, which I think is a good thing for Vic as a rapper or as an artist. But when it comes to the tracks themselves and production, other than the track with Pharrell and a few others, nothing on this thing is that impressive. Vic is kind of the definition of a rapper who has a rock and roll soul, and that mentality and kind of artistic acrobatic ability shows up on a lot of his tracks. If you're a Vic Mensa fan, I definitely think you'll enjoy the project. If you're not, I would definitely recommend it because I do think it's an enjoyable listen. I think some elements hold it back, as I said before, the lack of features, the fact that the features that are actually here aren't that hard hitting, the fact that Vic doesn't really explore that much when it comes to production on this project, the fact that as opposed to going deeper or more introspective in some topics, he tends to just ramble on for a little bit too long. Highlights for this thing though is it's very cohesive. It talks about Vic's struggles as a rapper, as a human being, you know, going through life, experiencing depression, suicidal thoughts, drug abuse, racism, police brutality, depression. It explores all those topics in pretty good detail in reference to Vince himself. Vic Mensa, the autobiography. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the project. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and leave a thumbs up. I'll see you in the next one. Like I said, there's a handful of tracks on here that I do want to get my hands on and go a little bit deeper into, but for the most part, I did enjoy the project. Vic, you did a pretty good job. It's been Shawn C, and I'm out. Peace.